Bill, or William Weasley, is the oldest of the 7 Weasley children. He's an amazing character, but unfortunately, the films left a lot of his character development out. We only saw him in Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, and even then, most of his story wasn't there, so there is loads more to his character arc. In this video, I'm going to fill in the gaps that the films missed, as well as correct what happened in the books versus the movies, so keep in mind I'm going by the novels, not the 8 films. Also, despite the fact that Bill plays such a large role in many of the games, I'm not including any video games like Hogwarts Mystery or Wizards Unite, because most Harry Potter fans don't consider the games to be canon. I thought this was the perfect time to make this video, because Bill's birthday was November 29th, which was actually last Sunday. And fun fact, he was born in 1970, so today in 2020, he would actually be 50 years old, which is absolutely insane. So let's celebrate the oldest Weasley on his birthday week by going over his entire timeline. Bill was the firstborn to Arthur and Molly Weasley, and he grew up in their house that was dubbed the Burrow. Like his mother and father, he had bright red hair, something that his family would become known for. When Bill was born, the family had an average amount of money, and they got by pretty well, meaning in Bill's early life, the family wasn't constantly worried about their finances. This began to change, however, as Bill got more and more siblings because there just wasn't enough money to go around, and over time, they became a rather poor family, which unfortunately, like their red hair, they would become known for. At the age of 2, Bill got his first sibling named Charlie, and at the age of 6, he got his second brother named Percy. At this point, they were okay with money, but moving forward is when they would begin to struggle financially. When Bill was 8, he got 2 more brothers, twins named Fred and George. At the age of 10, Bill got yet another brother named Ron, and finally at the age of 11, Bill got a sister named Ginny. During Bill's childhood, he witnessed the height of the First Wizarding War when Voldemort rose to power for the first time. Bill's 2 uncles on his mother's side, Fabian and Gideon Pruitt, joined the Order of the Phoenix, Albus Dumbledore's alliance to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Tragically, the 2 were murdered in the heat of a battle by a group of Death Eaters, and Bill had to deal with their loss at an age that was far too young. Bill was a very good kid while growing up and never got into trouble, which made Molly and Arthur's life very easy, something that cannot be said about some of Bill's younger siblings. Ginny always looked up to Bill more than any of her other brothers, as she viewed him as the coolest guy she knew, and the 2 had a special bond as the oldest and the youngest in the family. Ginny always took his side if there was an argument, and she valued what he said so much that if Bill said something, then to her that settled it, his opinion was all that mattered. The year that Ginny was born was the year that Bill headed off to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and just like his mother and father, he was sorted into Gryffindor House. Because Bill was the firstborn, he got brand new robes, books, and anything else he needed for school, but the rest of his siblings were forced to use hand-me-downs that were once his due to the family not having enough money. While at Hogwarts, Bill had a pen friend who was a student from the Wizarding School in Brazil, and the 2 became very close. Bill really wanted to visit him, but unfortunately, his parents said no because they could not afford it. When he told his pen friend that he couldn't go, he got mad and sent Bill a cursed hat that made his ears shrivel up. In his 5th year at Hogwarts, Bill took his OWLs, and he took a whopping 12 of them, a pretty impressive number, and he scored very well on all of them. In his 7th year, he scored very high on his NEWTs as well, which set him up for a successful future. On top of that, Bill was also made a prefect in his 5th year and head boy in his final year at Hogwarts, something that made his parents extremely proud. With all of these academic achievements, many would picture Bill to be more like his younger brother Percy, who would later go on to have many of the same academic achievements. But Bill was actually the opposite of this. He was actually really cool. He had grown his bright red hair out and tied it back into a ponytail, and when he wasn't wearing his Hogwarts robes, he wore clothes that would not look out of place at a rock concert. Bill finished his 7th year at Hogwarts in 1989, and not long after that, Bill got a job working for Gringotts, which had been his #1 desired career path. Seeing as he was a prefect, head boy, and a model student, it was no surprise to anyone that he landed this big job, and his parents were very proud of him. Gringotts was located in London, but Bill's job took him to Egypt, where he was permanently stationed. Bill's job at Gringotts was to work as a curse breaker, meaning he would remove counter curses or break curses that were placed on specific objects or even on a specific place or location. He would use these skills to venture through tombs, caves, mountains, deserts, and forests in search of old treasure troves, looking for things that would make the bank a profit. Because these places held treasure, it was essential that a cursebreaker like Bill break through the security the witch or wizard put in place to protect their loot. Otherwise, those curses could seriously injure or even kill those who got too close to it. He had a hard job, but he loved it. Because Gringotts was run by goblins, Bill got to know their kind very well, and one of the biggest takeaways he got from working with them was that they were not to be trusted or lied to, because they hated wizard kind for reasons that dated back thousands of years. If you're interested, I actually made a video on goblin history which explains all of this, which I'll link down below. But moving on. About 3 years into his work in Egypt, Bill was visited by his mother and father for the first time since departing for his job, and this was the first time he had seen any of his family since he moved to Egypt. A few months later, Bill's father Arthur won a grand prize, and they spent the money to take the whole family to Egypt to visit Bill, and he was delighted to have them. Bill took his family through a few tombs that he and his team had broken into, and he showed them some old Muggle skeletons that had been mutated, having grown extra hands and legs, and this was a direct result of the curses that Bill was hired to break through, showing just how important a curse breaker is. Had he not broken through the curses correctly, they too could have been mutated. The following summer, Bill came home to the Burrow so he could go to the Quidditch World Cup with his family. And this was the first time in several years that all 7 of the Weasley children were back home at the Burrow. This meant that there was limited space, however, especially because they were hosting Ron's friends Harry and Hermione on top of the 9 Weasleys. Bill had added to his coolness with a new fang earring that hung from one of his ears, something that Ginny thought was really awesome. When Ron's friend Harry arrived at the Burrow, Bill got to his feet smiling and shook Harry's hand, introducing himself. When Mrs. Weasley asked Bill and Charlie to set up the tables for dinner, the two decided to have some fun, and they used their wands to make the 2 tables fight each other in the air. Just as Bill's table lost a leg, Percy stuck his head out the window and told them to keep it down because he was working. And Bill apologized and made fun of his brother by sarcastically asking how his meaningless report was going, and Percy responded, slamming the window shut. Chuckling, Bill and Charlie put the tables back and magically fixed them so they could have dinner. During dinner, Mrs. Weasley was arguing with Bill about his new earring, and she asked what people at work thought. But Bill replied saying that no one at the bank gives a damn how he dressed as long as he brought them plenty of treasure. Mrs. Weasley then said that Bill's hair was looking silly and she wished he would let her cut it. But Ginny then chimed in and said that she liked it, and she jokingly added that it was nowhere near as long as Professor Dumbledore's. The next morning, everybody besides Mrs. Weasley went to the Quidditch World Cup, and luckily for Bill, along with Charlie and Percy, they did not have to wake up super early like everyone else because they could legally operate there later in the day. When it came time for the match, they all got to enjoy it in the best seats in the house, in the Minister of Magic's box. Bill enjoyed the match very much and was very grateful to be able to have such great seats because it wasn't often that their family got the best due to how poor they were. After the match, when everybody was sleeping, chaos erupted. Death Eaters attacked the campsite, and Bill along with Charlie and Percy came out of their tents with their wands raised. The 3 of them along with Mr. Weasley ran to help the ministry, and in the fight, Bill sustained a deep cut on his arm that was bleeding a ton. Luckily though, everybody was safe and the Death Eaters fled. The next morning, they all went back to the Burrow, and to distract themselves from all of the bad, Bill along with Charlie, Fred, George, and Ron played 3-on-3 Quidditch out in the orchard. When it came time for everyone to go back to Hogwarts for the start of term, Bill along with Charlie and Mrs. Weasley saw the younger ones off to platform 9 3/4. Before they boarded, Bill hinted to them that something special was going to happen that year, and he added that he wished he was back at Hogwarts for this special something. He then said he might even have to take off work to come watch a bit, but Bill did not give them any more clues despite them begging for more information. The thing that Bill was hinting at was the Triwizard Tournament, and Harry was unexpectedly chosen to participate. For the final task, each champion had their family come to watch, but seeing as Harry had no family besides the Dursleys, who would of course never come, Bill along with Mrs. Weasley came to support Harry as his family. While greeting Harry, another champion named Fleur Delacour started eyeing Bill with great interest. Fleur was the champion for the French Wizarding School, and she was actually a quarter Veela, a Veela being a semi-human magical species who are insanely beautiful and are hypnotically seductive and irresistible to men. Because Fleur was only a quarter Veela, the effects weren't as strong, but she was still pretty hypnotic as Bill's younger brother Ron found out as he embarrassed the heck out of himself asking her to the Yule Ball. As Bill looked around, he was delighted to be back, and he asked Harry if the picture of the Mad Knight named Sir Cadogan was still around, and Harry laughed saying yes. Harry then gave Bill and Mrs. Weasley a tour, and the two spent the rest of the day with Harry leading to the final task. Bill cheered Harry on as he went into the maze, but the task ended in disaster. Harry returned with a dead Cedric Diggory and claimed that Voldemort was back. Harry was taken away from the scene, and Bill, along with Mrs. Weasley, Ron, and Hermione were frantic trying to find him to make sure he was okay. Dumbledore eventually led them to the hospital wing where Harry was resting, and Dumbledore told Bill and the others not to ask Harry any questions about what had happened, and they all agreed. Bill then watched Cornelius Fudge and Dumbledore get into an argument, and he witnessed the two of them deciding to have a parting of the ways. After Mrs. Weasley told Dumbledore that she and Arthur were with him, Bill told Dumbledore that he would go find his father and tell him what happened, explaining how Fudge refused to believe that Voldemort was back and how he turned on Dumbledore. Dumbledore told Bill to be discreet, and Bill told Dumbledore to leave it to him. He patted Harry on the shoulder, kissed his mother on the cheek, said goodbye to everyone, and strode quickly from the room to follow through on Dumbledore's orders. Dumbledore restarted the Order of the Phoenix as the Second Wizarding War was now beginning, and this time, Bill along with his parents and Charlie joined, ready to fight, just like Bill's uncles Fabian and Gideon who lost their lives in the last war. Bill joined his parents along with Fred, George, Ron, and Ginny in moving into the Order's headquarters that summer at number 12 Grimmauld Place. Bill was very disappointed, however, when Percy refused to join and turned on him and the rest of the family, even saying the most horrid things he could think of to their father and slamming the door in the face of their mother when she tried to talk to him. In order to help out the Order of the Phoenix, Bill decided not to go back to Egypt and instead took a desk job at Gringotts in London, something that was far less thrilling than what he did in Egypt. But one good thing did come out of this. Fleur Delacour, the quarter Vila who was eyeing Bill back at Hogwarts, took a job at Gringotts, and Bill was giving her a lot of private lessons. I'll let you guys decipher what that means. Bill being home made a big difference for the Order, as they could use all the help they could get. One of the jobs that Dumbledore gave Bill was to persuade the goblins to take their side in this war, as Bill had worked closely with the goblins for many years during his time at Gringotts, but he was having little luck, because as I said earlier, they hated wizardkind, and they ended up not taking a side at all, despite all the work that Bill put in trying to persuade them. While on Order business, Mr. Weasley was attacked by Voldemort's snake Nagini, and when he was admitted to St. Mungo's hospital, Bill took the morning off from work and sat with his father. Bill was very worried, but luckily Arthur made a full recovery to the delight of the entire Weasley family and all of the Order. It eventually came out that Voldemort really did return, and Fudge was forced to step down as minister. After this, Bill was expecting Percy to take their side again, but Percy still refused to talk to his family, which really hurt Bill and the rest of the Weasleys. The war only got worse after this, as Voldemort was no longer in hiding, meaning he pulled out all of the stops to cause as much chaos as possible. Bill continued to spend a lot of time with Fleur Delacour, giving her more and more lessons. And eventually, the two fell in love. Bill cared for her very much, and decided that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. The summer before Harry's 6th year at Hogwarts, Bill proposed to Fleur, and she excitedly accepted. He then asked his brother Charlie if he would be the best man, and Charlie said he would be honored. Bill wanted Fleur to get to know his family better, so he invited Fleur to stay at the Burrow that summer while he was busy with work at Gringotts. However, Mrs. Weasley, along with Ginny, and even Hermione did not like Fleur that much, especially Mrs. Weasley. She felt that Bill had rushed into this engagement. Mrs. Weasley then argued that they had nothing in common, as Bill was a hard-working and down-to-earth sort of person, but Ginny cut in and told her mother that Bill was not down-to-earth, as he was a curse breaker. She said he liked a bit of adventure and a bit of glamour like the treasures he worked to find, and that was why he went after somebody like the quarter Vila Fleur. While at the Burrow, Bill and Fleur began to plan their wedding, and Mrs. Weasley would oftentimes busy herself with a minor chore, but was really listening to them and oftentimes glaring at Fleur, who she did not think was good enough for her eldest son. Bill and Fleur stayed at the Burrow through Christmas, and they continued to be lovey-dovey, something that annoyed Mrs. Weasley and Ginny, but made Ron watch so he could pick up tips, as he himself was in his first relationship with Lavender Brown. While everyone was home for the holidays, much to everyone's surprise, the new Minister of Magic showed up at the Burrow with Percy, and this ended in Percy getting food thrown his way by Fred, George, and Ginny, and he stormed out. Though they were mad, Bill and the entire Weasley family were sad that Percy had lost his way, and they all missed him. That spring, Dumbledore tasked a few Order members to patrol Hogwarts during his absence, and Bill was one of the members chosen. That night, Death Eaters entered the school with the help of Draco Malfoy, and an all-out battle commenced. During the fight, Bill ended up getting seriously injured when he was mauled by a werewolf named Fenrir Greyback. Bill lay on the ground during the remainder of the battle, so hurt that he was unable to move, and when the battle finally ended, he was rushed to the hospital wing. Greyback had mauled Bill so badly that his handsome face was no longer recognizable. It was badly slashed and ripped, and Harry thought to himself that he looked grotesque. Madame Pomfrey tried everything she could, but she told everyone that there was no cure for werewolf bites. Luckily, because Greyback wasn't transformed into his werewolf form, Bill did not become a werewolf himself, but as Lupin explained, the wounds on his face were cursed wounds, meaning they would never heal. He then explained that Bill might have some wolfish characteristics from now on. When Mr. and Mrs. Weasley arrived and saw their son, Mrs. Weasley cried out devastated. As she spread ointment on her son's wounds, she began to cry and her tears fell onto Bill's mutilated face. Mrs. Weasley began saying that looks did not matter, but she added that he was always a very handsome boy. She then cried, saying that he was going to get married, and Fleur cut in asking what she meant by going to. Fleur rounded on Mrs. Weasley, saying that he would still love her even after the accident, and a startled Mrs. Weasley said that she thought Fleur would not want to marry him anymore. Fleur said that they were still getting married, said she didn't care how he looked, and said that these scars only showed that her husband was brave. This made Mrs. Weasley finally accept her son's fiancé, and the two of them hugged each other crying, something that made Bill very happy to hear when he woke up. Bill had to stay in the hospital wing for a while after that, and his scars did not heal. In fact, they were as bad as ever. Thankfully though, his personality seemed just the same, and the only side effect from the bites was that he now had a great liking for rare steaks, something that made Fleur happy, as she said the British always overcooked their meat anyway. Bill was not the only one who was hurt in that battle. Dumbledore was killed by Snape, and days later, Bill attended his funeral. Because he was not 100% yet, however, Fleur supported him as they walked to their seats. Despite the terrible injury that Bill sustained, he and Fleur did not postpone their wedding, and they decided to have it at the Burrow that summer. Before that, however, they were tasked with the mission of getting Harry out of his aunt and uncle's house. Themselves and many other Order members were part of a plan where half of them would take Polyjuice Potion to look like Harry, and the other half would escort the lookalikes. Fleur took Polyjuice Potion and flew on a Thestral with Bill, as Fleur was not too fond of brooms. However, when everybody took off, they realized that they were betrayed and had fallen into a trap. A load of Death Eaters were waiting for them, and Bill watched as a flying Voldemort went after Mad Eye and Mundungus. Mundungus disoperated, and Voldemort's curse hit Mad Eye. Bill sadly watched as Mad Eye's lifeless body fell to the ground. There was nothing he could have done though, as they had half a dozen Death Eaters on their tail. They escaped and were the last ones besides Mad Eye and Mundungus to return. Everyone was so relieved to see them, but Bill ignored them all and looked straight into his father's eyes and told him that Mad Eye was dead. When they went inside, Bill pulled out a bottle of fire whiskey and some glasses, and when everyone had a glass, Bill held his up and said, "Mad Eye," and the rest of them did the same, toasting their fallen friend. Bill and Lupin then agreed that they had to go find Mad Eye's body, and when Mrs. Weasley asked if it could wait, Bill said that he was not going to let the Death Eaters get to his body first. After saying this, nobody else protested. Unfortunately, Bill and Lupin did not find Mad Eye's body, because just as Bill had feared, the bad guys had gotten to it first. To distract everybody, everyone threw themselves into preparing Bill and Fleur's wedding. They had Fleur's family stay at the Burrow, and Bill bonded with his future father-in-law and future family, including Fleur's little sister. When the ceremony took place, Bill stood with his best man Charlie, waiting for the love of his life to come and join him. When Fleur entered, Harry noted that normally her radiance dimmed everyone else by comparison, but that today it beautified everybody it fell on, making Bill look as though he had never been attacked by Greyback. After they both said "I do," Bill and Fleur then immediately vanished into a crowd of well-wishers, so happy that they were now married. The newlyweds were the first to take the dance floor and were greeted with a loud applause. Not long after that though, they got word that the Ministry had fallen, and a load of Death Eaters crashed the party. Bill, Fleur, and the rest of his family were forced to stay as everyone else escaped, and they were held for a bit. They were questioned, but ultimately they were let go. Now being married, Bill and Fleur moved out of the Burrow and got a house of their own in Shell Cottage. It was a very peaceful place, as their house stood alone on a cliff overlooking the sea. Bill went back to work, and one day while at the bank, he heard the news that Ginny and a few other students tried to steal the Sword of Gryffindor from Snape's office at Hogwarts, and Bill was worried about the consequences his younger sister would face, but luckily the punishment was just her going into the woods with Hagrid. Bill listened to the radio station called Potter Watch, which was the radio station that updated those supporting Harry about what was going on, and Bill had a real knack for guessing the passwords you needed to listen in. Bill was surprised when Ron showed up at his door in Shell Cottage, as Bill knew he was supposed to be on a mission with Harry and Hermione. Ron explained to him that they had gotten into a fight and so he left, and he told Bill that he did not have the guts to face their parents or other siblings and tell them that he abandoned his friends. Bill was not impressed when he heard what Ron had done, but he didn't go on about it because he could tell Ron really was sorry about what he'd done. He kept this a secret from the rest of the family, and on Christmas, he told Mrs. Weasley that he and Fleur were not coming because they wanted to spend their first holiday as a married couple alone, though it was really so Ron wouldn't be alone. But eventually Ron headed back to join his friends, which made Bill very happy. Not long after that though, Ron showed up again, but this time with Harry, Hermione, Luna, Ollivander, Dean, Griphook, and Dobby, and as Bill ran out to meet them, he saw that Dobby had lost his life. Bill let Harry bury Dobby outside their house, and afterwards, Harry told Bill that Ollivander and Griphook could not leave. Bill got a bit irritated that he was being told what to do in his own house, and he asked Harry what the hell was going on, as he showed up with a dead house elf, a half-conscious goblin, and Hermione who looked as though she had been tortured, which she of course was hours before. Harry told him, however, that he could not tell him, and said that Bill knew Dumbledore had left him a mission. An annoyed Fleur stormed off, but Bill ignored his wife and stared at Harry, and finally he agreed to let Harry do what he wanted. Bill hosted everybody as they got better, and he watched as Harry, Ron, and Hermione only emerged for mealtimes and spent all day talking to Griphook. When they did come out, Bill stared at them thoughtfully, but also in a concerned way. One day, Lupin arrived at Shell Cottage, and Bill was delighted to see him and meet his and Tonks' newborn baby named Teddy. After Harry was named the Godfather, Bill congratulated him on this, saying that it was a real honor, but then Bill got serious. He asked what Harry wanted from Griphook, and he asked what Harry had promised the Goblin. When Harry said he couldn't tell him, Bill warned Harry, saying that if he struck any kind of bargain with the Goblin, that he must be exceptionally careful, as goblins were a different species and viewed ownership differently than humans do. Harry noted that Bill was very smart and clearly knew more than he was letting on, as he warned Harry specifically about goblin-made items, which was the very thing that Harry had used to strike his deal with Griphook. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Griphook all left a few days after that to break into Gringotts. Bill and Fleur continued to house Luna and Dean, and when they got word that Harry was at Hogwarts, all four of them arrived ready to fight in the battle. The rest of the Weasley family arrived as well, and to everyone's shock, this included Percy. Percy apologized to his family, and then went up to Fleur, and as he shook her hand, he said he was happy to have her as a sister-in-law. This and the apology cleared the air, and the Weasley family was back together again. However, this did not last. The final battle was brutal, and the Weasley family took a serious loss. During a break in the battle, Bill discovered that his brother Fred had been killed, and he and the rest of the Weasleys, along with Fleur, all mourned their fallen brother. Despite this loss, they fought back harder than ever, and Bill and everyone else avenged Fred's death by defeating the Death Eaters and Voldemort once and for all. Following the war, Bill and Fleur had 3 children, Victoire, Dominique, and Louis Weasley. Victoire was born on the anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts, thus her name, which means victory in French. She would eventually go on to have a relationship with Lupin and Tonks' son Teddy, the baby that Lupin had introduced Bill to when he came to Shell Cottage. Bill continued to work at Gringotts, but instead of going back to his desk job, he went back to Egypt and began doing Cursebreaker work again. In 2014, Bill and the rest of his family, both his and Fleur's family, and all of his siblings and their spouses attended the Quidditch World Cup final. Bill lived out the rest of his days a happy man, madly in love with the girl of his dreams, and delighted to have such an amazing family. Bill was a cool, kind, adventurous person who cared deeply about the ones he loved. Over the years, he was an incredible son, an incredible brother, and a great role model to his younger siblings, and he of course went on to be an incredible husband and an incredible father. Bill, the oldest Weasley child, will always be remembered for nothing but good things, as he lived a full and meaningful life. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life and more of this little dude. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe. I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed below. If you want to be featured on the next video, plus get a bunch of other rewards, become a patron today. Again, thank you so much for watching, and look out for more great Movie Flame videos on the way.